Welcome everyone, good afternoon. This is the Kappa HC weekly educational talk. So last week we already have Dr. Min Wu. She talked about ones, the middle kingdom ones and zeros for elementary schoolers. And this week she will continue the talk to middle school and high school zeros, ones, and hidden pictures. Welcome, Dr. Wu.
Okay, thank you very much for Dr. Lu hosting this very interesting series of educational talks. And I have also seen a number of friends from last week joining and welcome back. And there are also a number of new friends coming. So today's talk, I'm going to tailor more for our bigger students in middle school and high school. But when I introduce some of the math, I will try to explain so that the younger student may also try to get some of the basic meanings. And we will actually see our students joining last week also have a little advantages because they have played a game with me and to learn this amazing word where the numbers, we don't have a 0 to 9 as we usually do and studied in elementary school, but we are looking at numbers just using zeros and ones. And so today I will start with playing this game, but with a reverse role. So I actually have a piece of paper here. I'm not going to show you yet. I've already written down a number in the range of 0 and 30. So I am going to ask my friends to think about how you can guess this number and what would be the strategy you could use to ask questions, as few questions as possible, and we'll be able to have a guarantee that you will find the right number each time and every time. And here the questions are also limited to only allowing you to ask questions where the answer will be either yes or no. So it's just two possible answers. So let's look at what I have prepared to help you formulate and find the right set of questions. And I prepared these 5 slides that my friends returning have seen last time when we played. So I would be able to tell you yes or no, the number that I was writing it down is in each of these cards. So we are going to start with our card number 5 here. And I will record the answers here, and for you to help us figure out what will be the process of doing the guess, and we will analyze how this works. So start with card number 5. The number I've already putting down is not in this card. So I'm going to put in my recording sheet, and this also on the website that I prepared. You can ask your parents, or if you have a cell phone, on my first slides. Later on, I will also give this to you to be able to see the website, and you can download the worksheet of the game to play. So here, this is a number that's not in the not in card number 5. And then we are going to move on to the next card, card number 4, the number I putting in. So if you ask me, is it in this card? And the yes or no answer I gave you is yes. And similarly, we move on to card number 3, and the number I had is in this card. And then card number 2 here, the number is in, but it was not in the first part. So now you have recorded the answers of that I gave you, the yes or no answers. And what we will see that usually for mathematician, they like to use numbers. When they have only two choices, they can choose 0 and 1, and usually a no would means a 0, and the yes would means 1. So we, by asking me 5 questions, you had recorded a sequence of 0 and 1s in the form of 0, 1, 1, 0. So then how do we make sense of this to make our best guess of what's the number that I wrote down? So I want you to take a look. And my friends in middle school and high school may have seen a bunch of numbers and different answers, and you could look at what are their logical relations. And look at the first answer I gave you about our card number 5. And I told you that it was not here. And let's look at the pattern of the cards that I prepared for you. And you can see that first, each of the cards actually have exactly the same number of numbers showing up. There are 16 numbers showing up. For the card number 5, all the bigger values was in. And when I told you that my number wasn't in, so you already know this is a fairly small numbers, and it's actually smaller than 16. And then when we move on to the next card, you see that in this card, every other lines of numbers were in. And you already know my number is quite a small value. So you will be able that my numbers will be rows that it was showing up in card number 4. And by a similar strategy, when we move on to card number 3, you will be just looking at this row based on what we have already narrowed down, and you will know that it will be one of these 4 numbers. And when we're moving on, and I told you it was in card number 2, you were able to just narrow down to these 2 numbers. And using the last answers, I told you it wasn't in card number 1. And you see what are the patterns in our card number 1. All the numbers showing up are odd numbers, so 1, 3, 5, 7, and so on and so forth. And all the missing ones are the even number. So for my you know, it's an even number, this to make the right guess. So we also analyze the pattern, but I also give them a helping table and to help them to translate between what we call as the decimal or in regular number with all the digits 0, 1 to 9. And translating digit values or binary. And in this lookup table, what you would do is based on the answers that you got, and you write on our recording sheet, you found it's 0, 1, 1, 0, and we are going to look at this binary columns and look at where is 0, 1, 1, 0. And you look it up, hey, this is going to be the number translating back to our base 10, the decimal system, as 14. Now, let's take a look at how did we come up with this number. And first, I want to let you know that for things that in our everyday life, we have quite a few opportunities to have just 2 choices. For example, we could turn the lights on or off, turn the machine on or off. And a simple picture have just two colors, like your printer would be printing things either black or white. And our answers, the simplest questions, the answers to those would be yes or no, such as the examples that we were playing in the game. And for we have just two choices. In our everyday life, they mean they can mean different things. And our mathematicians are really good in what we call as modeling these different scenarios with what we often call as abstraction, meaning that, well, no matter how this different choices, I'm going to use the number to represent, to describe them. And we often use 1 and 0 in mathematics. Okay, so with that, let's look at how we come up with this translating table. And what we are actually doing here is just start with counting. So we have one column is our regular decimal base 10 system. So let me write it down. So this is a decimal, also known as the base 10 system, meaning we have 10 digits there, and the binary is our base 2 system. So let's look at how do we learn counting in kindergarten and elementary school. So we start with just a loose item and counting it one by one, adding one each time until we use up all our digit values. So from 0 to 9. And then when we add in one more item, what do? We had learned that with the loose item reaching 10, we use up all the digit values. We are going to learn to move up to the next place value, which will be discussing how many tens are there. And our original one starting with just tell us how many loose ones are there. So that's what we had done. So we had a 1 telling us I have just one bundle of tens, and I do not have any loose items. As we continue counting, we start adding loose items, so 11, 12, and then until we reach 19. And now when we add one more, we are going to binary, we have just two choices, 0 and 1. But the counting strategies are actually the same. So what we did is we are going to start again with our loose items, 0 and 1. So you can see this translation is quite easy. But now as we add in one more, we found that we already use up, so 0 and 1, we already use up all the available to us. So what do? In the binary systems, we have only 2-digit choices. So this will be the time that we need to move up and use the next place value to describe how many bundles of 2. So that is where the binary versions of our 2 will be 1, 0. And then we continue the counting. So we add one loose item. We can count 1, 1. And now when we add up one more, that will be 4 items in total. But now you can see that when we have a 1, 1 here, we adding 1, we already used up all the possible choices. So we need to bundle it as 2. And now adding to the original bundle 2, we have 2 bundles of 2. But we do not have more than 0 and 1 values to use. What do? What did we do in our decimal system? We introduced 1 place value. So what we are going to do is in our binary system, when we use up the possibility, we are going to introduce another place values. And this will be telling me, so 2 bundles of 2 will be a total of total bundle of 4s. So that is why you can see this translation tables will be showing a number 4 in our regular system will be 1, 0, 0 in the base 2 binary system. And then we continue the process whenever we reach everything to be used up to be 1s. We are going to move up 1 place value. So a number 8 will be needing to use a total of 4 things. So each of this we call them as 1 bit. So at least we need to use 4 bits for the numbers above 8, and then so on so forth. So that is how we, through counting both in the base 10 system and the base 2 system, we learned to put up these translating tables and matching the regular base 10 with the binary system. So whenever you have a doubt and you didn't remember or you do not have the handout I prepared for you, you can just start with the same principle to do the counting, but using only 2 values, 1 or 0. Whenever you use up, move up to the next place value. Okay, so that's how we put up this translating table to help us. And you may ask why we are doing this. It seems that at least you could look at here, for things as 30 or 31, we only need 2 digits in the decimal, but with the binary system, I have to write a total of 5 bits. So why we have all these tedious and comparison systems that have such a long number in sequence? And it turns out that when the scientists and engineers want to build a machine, especially a machine can help us do things automatically, and that can help us do some computations. It is hard to build a machine that will be able to handle a large number, for example, number 120. It's hard for a machine to remember that large number for a long time very reliably. And it's also difficult for the machine to send that number reliably, let's say by adjusting the loudness of my speaker and broadcasting to my neighbors what number I want to send. It will not really reliably sending out for a long distance. So what scientists and engineers find that they have figured out ways to store binary numbers to do computations with just the binary numbers directly. They can do addition, subtraction, multiplications, all the things you have learned in the decimal. We will be able to find a way for the machine to do. And in addition, over decades, they have worked together to find ways to make those computations and transmissions of the binary numbers reliably. They were also able to make it increasingly smaller. And this is an example showing up the switches, which is really a machine way to describe 0 and 1s. So those switches in the older days, in the 1930s and 40s, scientists researchers have to use electron tubes, just like a bulb, pretty bulky, just to represent 1 bit information. And in order to describe a reasonably large number to do a computation, they will have to put up a lot of such tubes. So the first computer is far less powerful than your cell phone today. It would occupy multiple rooms in the building. But over the years, scientists discovered new material and also find ways to put many switches into a small space. For example, they use the material of silicon and find ways to put up a lot of storage of this binary and do computations with on this slice of silicon. They can squeeze many what they call as computer or electronics chips. And then those chips would be made up to our beloved iPad, iPhone, your game machines, your computer. There are many of such tiny circuits, tiny switches there. And we find that we can have this very reliably and longer in terms of sending over distance and storing it for longer time. We can also make computation much faster. These are really the foundations of today's digital information era. That everyone, including us in school, including our today's Zoom technical talk over the network, really benefit from those revolutionary technology. And for our middle school and friends who love reading and love technology, I would recommend you check out. Okay, let me see. I have. I think this didn't. Let me recast. Okay. So, okay. Let's see. Okay. So you see this book cover. This is a very nice book giving really historical reviews of many of the important discoveries that enabled our digital revolution. The author was Walter Isaacson. He was a very well-known biographer, have written the book for Steve Jobs. And in this book, he will show for over 100 years how technology evolved and what are the important moments, how groups of genius, including a number of women, in really inspiring girls to be also in the STEM areas together with the boys, and how many of them in the past as genius, as geeks, as hackers created this digital revolution, and how technology enabled us to eat. And you can ebook and audiobook in the county's public library. So now I'm going to move on to do a little deeper dive in terms of speaking in math to see can we make sense of those numbers in binary. And similar to our earlier discussion, I'm going to start with your familiar base 10, the decimal system we use every day. When we say it's 11, which in the base 10, we mean we have one loose item, and then we have a 10, actually one bundle of 10. And for a three-digit numbers in the we have one loose item 1. In this case, so 521, so means we have 2 bundles of 10, and then we have 5 bundles of 100. And here I'm going to moving on to use a notation here that our middle school and high school friends have seen. When you have 100, it's 10 times 10. And we use this interesting notation. So it's 10 with a small number, we call it a superscript 2. This basically means we will take that number 10 and multiply by itself for a total of how many times? This is 2, so a total of 2 times. Okay. Now, in the binary system, it's actually very similar. If I give you a binary number of 1011, we can follow the similar logic, except that instead of a bundle of 10, now we have a bundle of 2. So let's see, we have a loose item 1, and then the next bit is 1, so that represents a bundle of 2, and then the next one, if you remember, it represents a bundle of 4, and I don't have any, so I can, so bundle of 4. Bundle of 4 is basically, okay, let me finish this and then we will, and then the next one will be, again, double of that. So it will be a bundle of 8. And I'm going to use this fancy exponent power term notations to show you the 2 actually means 2 square, or 2 times 2. And then 8 is 2 cubic, or 2 to the 3rd power. This is basically, we are going to multiply 2's 3 times. So 2 times 2 times 2. Okay, if you have a longer binary numbers, we are going to move up in a similar fashion. Now I want you to add up this. So 8, and here plus, so 8 plus 8 plus 0, and then plus 2 will be 10, and then plus 1. So this is 11. And to avoid confusion, I use a parenthesis with a subscript 10 to represent that is using a base 10 decimal system. And I use a subscript 2 to represent that I'm using a binary base 2 system. So we can make sense of any length of a binary number this way. Now, let's see how large is the binary number we will be able to represent. So before I move on to show you some bigger numbers that will be made up by just 1s and 0s, I have some extra challenges for middle school and high school students to take a note. What if you could figure out, see if you can figure out a base 3 number system, and can you add another column here in the table to be a base 3? So what would be, for example, any number I pick, what would be 7 in a base 3? And what base 3 means that you have 3 possible digit values, 0, 1, 2, and then whenever you use up, you are going to move up to the next place value. So see if you can add a column of base 3. And then for extra challenge, think about what would be a bigger base. What would be a base 16? Base 16 would mean that you can have 16 different digit values. And my hint here is you can use 0 to 9. And to avoid confusion, we are going to start using letters A, B, C, and so on. So you will have 16 choices. And so you can add a column here for the 16. And I want you, after you figure those out, and to see what are the relations between the binary, the base 2 and the base 16. So that will be the take-home extra challenges if you want to tackle those fun puzzles. Okay, now I'm going to, as promised, to show you what would be the how large a number can we use this string of 1s and 0s to describe. And what we were going to start is how about a 10-bit number? And last time already have friends asking me, what does giga mean? And we're going to figure out. So let's start with simple. So what if we put up 10, a string of 10 zeros and 1s, a different combination? And what is the largest numbers that we could describe in different possibilities? So that would mean that we could represent up to actually just a 1 minus 1 away from this different possibility of combination. If everything would be setting up to 1, it would be just one step short of 2 to the 10th. And 2 to the 10th, you can basically multiply 10 2's together. And if you do some calculation, this is just over 1,000. So 1,024. I know my friends have learned in school very good to make an approximation. So this is roughly about 1,000. And when we use this to discuss, say, 1,000 gram, 1,000 meter, we call them as kilo. Now, let's double the number of zeros and ones. If you have a number that can be described using 20 zeros and ones, this more that's really big. It's going to be a lot of computation if you're just multiplying them one by one. But for friends in the middle school and high school, you may have seen this thing, that if I have this thing on the superscript that can be a product of two numbers, then we could actually writing it in terms of 2 to the 8th power, and then taking that as a whole, and the 2 to the b's power. So this I could use 2 to 10 as building block. So this will be roughly a squared of 1,000, and that would be about 1 million, just over 1 million. And we would call them in short name as mega. And similarly, if we have 30 bits, this will be a number at the level of 2 to the 30, and this will be 10 to the 9th. So meaning this is a big number. In our decimal system, it will be 1 followed by 9 zeros. So this is 1 billion, and in short name, we call them as giga. And we can continue. So 40 bits, it will be 10 to the 12th. That's a trillion. Short name will be tera. 50 will be 10 to the 15th. So 1 followed by 15 zero, a really huge number. It's a quadrillion. Short name will be peta. And further, if we have 60 bits, it will be 10 to the 18th power. It will be a quartillion. So this is actually also related to a legend that you may have heard, a story about the inventor of a chess game that being asked by the king how the king can reward this genius. And he said, I'm not really asking a lot. I'm going to ask to get wheat, which I can use to feed my family, my village. And I'm going to ask you to just put up 1 grain of wheat in the first square of the chessboard, and then 2. So every time we are going to double. So, and then in total, the king said, well, this is really nothing. You see, when I add up all those, it may be 100, but when you continue, you're going to see we are looking at really large numbers, not even reaching the final square, the final 64 squares. We are already looking at a huge number, 1 followed by 18 zeros. In terms of the grain of wheat, it's really a huge number here. And then if we are going to weigh them, it's about 1. So I have a lot of zeros here. Basically 1.2 trillion tons. So 1 ton is 1,000 kilograms, and 1 kilogram is over 2 pounds. So that's a lot of wheat. And how large is this number? Even in today's technology and agriculture, we still do not have even 1 billion tons of grain to add up all the wheat productions and plantations in the world. And this is still more than 1,000 times of lower than what you will need to fill up this checkerboard. So you can see that with many bits, you can represent a really large number. And how this will be useful to look at pictures. So last time, some of our friends asked me, how do I really count on the pictures? I said that there are 2 very important steps. One is a computer really likes just a finite amount of data, and they like to describe in bits. So what we will do is we will first to have what we call as sampling. And when you have something from the real world, be it a picture or the sound, the music you play, or from many sensors like temperature, they usually are very continuous and they can changing continuously over time, over different days. So what we would usually do is we start doing sampling. We only take values at, so let's say once a day, or if this is pictures, we only take those color value or brightness values and on an even grade spacing, usually evenly, and all those in between, I'm not going to care. I only tell you what will be the color at those locations. And each of them is called a pixel. You may have heard it. It's just a short name of picture element. So how dense should we sample? And I'm going to show you an example. Here, I only sampled 16 different locations in each row and 16 rows. So a total, I have 256 pixels. Any of you can guess what it is? Is there a person there? Is there an animal, a pet? We couldn't really tell because I didn't really give enough samples to have sufficient information. Okay, so I'm going to give you more samples, and I'm going to 4 times quadruple each, so 64 along each rows and a total of 64 rows. So this will be over 4,000 pixels, and you start to see some details. And this is a lady, and she seems to be beautiful, but we couldn't tell about details of her eyes and also what's going on her head. I couldn't really tell. If I further allow you to take more samples and denser, and you would take 4 times more horizontally and vertically, giving you over 65,000 pixels. Now we start to be able to see more details. So this will mean we often hear grown-ups say your resolution is large enough. And what are the resolution when you go to shop for a TV? And people may talk about the HD resolution. It's about almost 2,000 pixels for each rows, and just over 1,000 rows, or they call it lines. So in total, these are about 2 million pixels. And then the newer technology, they will charge you more to get a nicer TV called a 4K resolution, will be doubling both the pixels in each row and doubling also the rows or lines. And that is over 8 million pixels. And for each of that, if we are going to store the pictures, we also have to describe what's the color there. And the color, usually we will tell, okay, how much red light, how much green light, and how much blue light I should shine in combination, give you different color. But that's a little bit complex, so I'm going to stay simple. We are going to just looking at what we call as a grayscale picture. Just give you different shades of gray. And a common choices will be using 8 bits, and this gives us 2 to the 8, so a total of 256 different shades of gray, different combinations. So let's see what it means. So with 8 bits of on each pixel, our Lana, you can see her shoulder is really nice, very smooth. We have all the details. And 1 bit, if we use electronic to store them or in the computer, we call them a byte. So this will take more than 60,000 bytes. So we call them 65 kilobytes. Well, if you say, I want to save my storage, I want to store more pictures, let's save on the number of bits I will spend to describe each pixel. I will cut them to half, 4 bits. 4 bits was 2 to the 4, a total of 16 combinations of gray shades. So you see that we still use the Lana, but if you look closer, our shoulder, it's no longer as smooth, no longer as nice. The quality is not so high. Now, if you want to cut down further in terms of the number of bit pixels you are going to spend in shades, ugly. I only have 4 shades. I can't really describe that really nice gradient here. And I have just a little brighter and somewhat brighter ones, a little darker gray, and no longer beautiful. So that means that the more bits you spend to describe this different color, different be able to describe better quality. Now, we are going to answer the question, how am I going to hide one picture in another picture? So we are going to create a picture-in-picture effect. And here, just to recap, we are looking at a grayscale picture with 8 bits for each pixel, and that giving us 256 shades of gray. Every pixel, I will use it to record their brightness, usually describing the black, to everything will be 1, describing the white, very bright areas. Now I'm a bit. They are not equally, and if you look at this line, when you're flipping them as least significant, LSB, the least significant means that they are not so important to describe the overall of that pixel, because when you're flipping them, the change more or less in this multiple shades of gray choices. So what I do example here, sorry. Here I'm going to zoom in. This one, I actually used 128 to display the shades. And you see this one and this one in their cell, they are actually almost the same, just minus 1 shade. So this is 128, so that's 127. And this one, I just add 1 shade up. They are so similar, I cannot even tell the difference. If you do not looking at the numbers, you can't really tell difference. And how about this one? This one, I made bigger changes. So I minus the 10 shades. So this is 10 shades of darker and 10 shades of brighter. You start to be able to see a little bit darker, a little bit brighter compared with the center one. If I make a little bit bigger changes, you will be able to see. So this is 20 different shades of gray, but they are still quite similar. So that tells you that when I just change the last few bits, the changes I make is almost invisible to our human eye. But if I'm going to toggle the top bit, which we call as the most significant bits, this is actually tells us, if you remember in our number game, this was to tell you, is it a large number? Is it a brighter pixel? Is it a darker pixel? So that's really important. If you're going to change that, this is going to change it to either really, really bright or really, really dark. So if I can only send 1 bit information, I have to switch, I'm going to keep that one. But if I'm going to make really small changes, I would choose to change those lower number of bits. So that's going to be the strategy we would use to start hiding pictures in another picture. Okay, so let me use this. So you see it here. And see if I can annotate with this is what you just saw. Let me see. Okay, so I'm going to use 2 pictures. This is a statue picture, and I'm going to try to hide some important message. It's a picture of the Pentagon looking from the sky. And this is a picture that has a lot of bits. So I'm going to try to reduce what I can put in. And I'm going to keep just the top bits, the most significant bits in this picture. Every pixel, I only keep 1 bit, and that will be showing up here. So this is almost like I only keep, is this pixel a brighter one or a fairly darker one, such as in the shadow? So even though I lose the details, the shape of this building still gets kept. And what I'm going to do is I will put this bit into the last, that least significant bits, the not so important ones, into the statue picture. So one of this picture was the original one, and the other was the last bit encoding into it the Pentagon image. Now, looking at this here, can you tell the difference? Actually, can you tell which one was the original picture I showed you, and which one was the one that having this Pentagon hidden in? You can take a guess. Actually, if I do not have the notes to record how I put up this slide, I couldn't even tell. This is because that tiny changes, our eyes cannot tell the difference. But if I'm really greedy, I would replace too many bits with the Pentagon image. I can get the Pentagon image recovered very well, but you start to see the picture is no longer hidden. In the statue, you already know I hide something there, and you see there is some textures of these different wings of the Pentagon building being show up on the fairly smooth background area in the statue. But the idea here is I could encode information into an innocent picture and hide some messages and away from your friends or your family or from the authority. So that's the basic idea of hiding pictures. Here, the picture hidden is not so reliable. There are ways to easily remove or change them. And over the years of research, researchers as well as such as myself and my colleagues, we have figured out how we can very reliably putting in hidden pictures or hidden messages. Both government agencies as well as Hollywood today, they could use this as a way to embed and encode hidden labels into the picture. So if someone leaked this secret information, we will be able to see whose digital watermark are there and hold this Alice accountable. So that's the idea of forensic watermark. To make very small changes, but make it reliably. To have seen a basic idea, but scientists and engineers are building a more sophisticated ones to make it more reliable, difficult for the bad guys to remove. And then so moving on to wrapping up the talk, there are also many other ways and exciting research to play with very small changes, very small signals. I do not have time today to go into details to tell you how we could actually use the very small signals in the video and also in the sound to tell when and where a video was shot. And many people fighting terrorists would want to know when a terrorist propaganda video being aired in the TV station. So if you scan this QR code, there is a technical stories that you can learn some more, and I'll be also happy to put on some more references if you're interested in. And also, if you scan the this QR code on the site, you will see a video showing that we will be able to harness that very small signals when you take a video while doing jogging on the treadmill or doing the exercise bike indoors. Then we can actually tracking your heart rate, and you don't have to wear anything, no wearables, no professional chest strap that's not so comfortable. We just need to analyze the small changes on your face in terms of the color and be able to track your heartbeat. And in addition to the application in sports and fitness, this is also being looked into for me and my colleagues, looking into how we can use both this non-contact sensing as well as some of the emerging wearable sensors to help track the patient's conditions and help track symptoms as early as possible to together manage the COVID pandemic in months to come. So I want to stop here and thank you very much for your attention on this tour of exploring ones and zeros and the hidden pictures and the very small microsignals. And if you scan this QR code, you will see the website where you will find the PDF files of the slides, as well as last week's material there. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wu. It's so interesting to learn all those hidden pictures and be able to see your heartbeat. That's so cool. So everyone, if you have any questions, you can just type in the chat. Now I'm going to change the setting so you can type your chat to everyone so people see your question. And Dr. Wu, last week we had a couple of questions from students that we didn't have time to answer. I think one of the questions about if you have well, I think at this time I don't have that in front of me, but let me check.
Right, right now I do not have it in front of me. I think one was addressing in terms of the pictures resolution, how do we store them? And what I had showed during the talk was a simple way to store pictures. But you already have seen it's going to take many bits of bytes to store them. And in fact, today's information technology, especially the multimedia technologies, really are a lot of advances made because of we have ways to compress the signals using as few bits as possible. And that's one of the core areas of research and contributions in what we call as ECE, Electrical and Computing Engineering, and also some of the branches in computer science. So together in what we call as the EECS, Electrical Engineering and Computing, we have seen ways to squeeze those not so important bits to allow us to store those pictures, music, and video in very few bits necessary, and we can enjoy them, and we can also send them through communication channel, another important areas in the engineering research to enable us sharing information, storing information. And the second question from last week was about the display, about different display technologies. And so those technologies are usually really funded and rooted from applied physics, electrical engineering, and the material science and engineering research. And then to find new mechanisms to display color, to display things as bright as possible that we can enjoy, and also to be able to display many pixels in a dense area so that the resolution that we talk about could be high and the overall picture quality can be really good and improved.
Thank you, Dr. Wu. I think last week, yeah, he's indeed about different type of screens. One is LCD, the other one is OLED. So he was asking, what is the difference between those two?
Right. So they have a different. Right. So they have a different lighting mechanism. The LCD is the liquid crystal device. So those are one type of ways to lighting up the backlight. And actually earlier, there are also different lighting mechanisms, and each of them had improved in terms of what we call as a refreshing rate. If the light are really flashing, it's going to make our eyes quite tiring and uncomfortable. So gradually, scientists has discovered a new material to have a good property to make the color really bright, to improve the density in terms of or resolution in terms of the display. And we have seen from a mathematical abstraction in this talk how important the resolution means in this lady picture that I showed you. Okay, so in this lady picture that I showed you, if we cannot really put in enough pixels, the picture won't look good. And even if you have a good resolution, if you do not have enough color levels or brightness levels, the picture may not look really good either. So a lot of advances are really in those fronts, as well as in terms of if I can achieve the same quality level, could I use as little power as possible? Because energy is not unlimited. And we also would like to have energy conservation to use as low power as possible.
Thank you. We have another question. Do you extract the hidden picture by subtracting the original and the altered pictures, or do you need to know the algorithm to extract the info?
That's a very good question. So today I only took a very kind of quick discussion on one of the most easily understandable strategies of putting hidden information. In this particular example, since if you're looking at here, let me enable the annotation. Since I just looking at a binary descriptions of the pixels brightness or color, and then changing the pixels, changing the bits close to the last few bits, and replacing them with what I want to put in. In this particular strategy, I do not even need to know the original picture in order to read out what hidden picture that we have putting in. So in this particular example, I just need to read out the last bit and then putting this into the array here and visualize it for you. But there are strategies that was adding a signal onto the original with some really nice properties. And in those cases, if you would know the original picture, it may help you to decode the messages and with some good properties. And if you do not, there are still strategies you can decode, but you may have to pay some price. For example, you might not be able to hide so many bits. You might have to sacrifice in terms of what we call as payload. So that's in particular in this area of forensic watermark. And we have really those strategies because of the need to make this embedded watermark really reliable, very hard to remove, even when people try to print out a hard copy or try to do heavy compression. So in order to obtain those robustness, we need a different kind of strategy. And there's also some security requirement if I don't want the message to be readable by an arbitrary person. For example, the bad guy, I don't want them to be able to know what kind of messages I'm putting in, so they could tamper it. And when you have those requirements, there are additional considerations. So you could see many of those advanced information technology problems need really a sequence of modules and a sequence of sub-problems to in our overall solution.
Yeah. So our last question is, how does a computer differentiate LSB versus MSB?
Very good question. Actually, when the computer, I talk about the switches, right? When the computer would store this, they would use tiny switches. They would use 8 of them, or they have some other mechanism, but the simple way is to just use 8 switches to store them. In that situation, the computer, when we design it, we will hardwire to tell computer to know this is called LSB, this is the MSB, the most significant bit. And there are some variations of that strategy. For example, I may store it in a sequential way, and then in all cases, we have to, in our design, to teach the computer what are the logic we have, which one is LSB, which way would be MSB. So actually the smartest one are still the designer, and I'm actually also looking at many of you to be the future inventor.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Wu, for a great talk, and thank you everyone for staying engaged, asking all those interesting questions. I hope some of you will become a future computer scientist or electrical engineer or working on those hidden pictures. Okay, thank you everyone. And then next week, we'll have a gentleman who talk about car maintenance and repair. So if any of you are interested or any of your parents are interested, please join us. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.